Hello, and welcome to the 2024-25 TMEA All-State Bassoon Etude tutorial video. My name is Amanda Swain. I play bassoon with the Houston Grand Opera and Houston Ballet Orchestras, and I teach bassoon at Sam Houston State University. The purpose of today's tutorial is to give you a complete recording of each etude, to walk through the more challenging parts of each etude, and to give you some general practice and performance strategies. Also, if you haven't already, check out my written guide to these etudes on the TMEA website. I give lots of tips and tricks that you may find helpful as you learn this music. Before we get into it, I just want to make a note that everyone starts learning these etudes from different points. Regardless of where you are in your current study of the bassoon, I encourage you to play with the beautiful sound always, and learn each of these etudes at a slow tempo, like super slow, so you can hear every detail of every note, so you can refine how you get from note to note, and so you can focus on your fundamentals and develop a really comprehensive understanding of each etude before even thinking about speeding things up. Everyone's progress here will look different. Be patient, trust the process, and have fun as you figure out how to make music that means something with each of these etudes. Let's get into it. We are in the very friendly key of C major, which means no sharps or flats in the key signature, with a tempo marking of allegretto, meaning moderately fast but slower than allegro. Try not to push it over quarter note equals 80. I would start learning this etude at half tempo for the purpose of hearing how you move from note to note. Really listen for how you're using your air and if your fingers are perfectly coordinated. I like to think about using legato, or really smooth, unbroken air, throughout this etude. There are a lot of arpeggios, or broken chords, here. You may find certain intervals are more challenging to make clean than others. Let's look at an example of a tricky arpeggio in measure 11. And I'd like to walk through a practice strategy I'll call backwards practice, where you take the last note of a group of notes and gradually add notes before the last note until you can make the entire measure or group of notes clean, like this. If you find other measures that sound uneven, try practicing using dotted rhythms. For example, measures 12 and 13 and other bars like it. Let's try it. We also have a tendency to rush the turnarounds in phrases, or where the music changes direction, like in measure 1 and measure 9. So let's make sure to play those notes where the music changes direction, full value. We have two high notes in this etude, the B in measure 32 and the C at the very end. The trick to high notes is not rushing the notes that precede them. If you have a beautiful sound on the notes before the high notes, you will be set up for success on the high notes. Sometimes drawing tenuto lines, or lines that indicate length, on the note or two before the high note can help your brain slow down a little bit. The main thing is not to panic and to play all of the notes beautifully. If you're learning the fingerings up in this part of the bassoon for the first time, practicing them consistently in the context of scales every day will help build familiarity with these notes. The trills at the end should be played with control, and listen for both notes of the Nachschlags or turnarounds after the trills. They don't need to be lightning fast. Really take advantage of your dynamic distinctions throughout this etude, playing with a beautiful singing sound on the fortes and an excited, quiet sound on the pianos. We are in the very sad sounding key of C sharp minor. I know there are 4 sharps in the key signature, so you might think we're in E major, but we're not. One way to get familiar with this key is to practice your E major scale, but start it on C sharp. One of the hardest things about this etude is starting it. So let's discuss a couple of strategies. First, let's just practice low C sharp with a really relaxed embouchure, an open vowel sound, and warm air. Practice it first at a comfortable dynamic, and then work your way down to a softer dynamic. Also, remember that the opening is just piano, not pianissimo. It doesn't need to be the softest note you've ever played in your life. Just piano will be fine. One other trick that I like to think of, if the first note of a piece is challenging, is imagining a series of pickup notes, singing them in my head, or sometimes actually making up a few notes and playing them first, like this. It makes starting a piece less scary if you've already kind of started the music in your head first. It's important throughout this etude to use a really legato airstream. If you find some notes are responding late, imagine little crescendos between notes to remind yourself to use a smoother, uninterrupted, more supported, forward-moving airstream. This is helpful in measure 1, measure 9, measure 18, etc. One practice technique you may want to experiment with in this etude is playing without vibrato. It's harder than it sounds. You will be able to hear your pitch centers more clearly and how you are getting from note to note. If anything is unstable with vibrato, vibrato will only highlight those instabilities. Here's an example of how to play without vibrato. When you do decide to incorporate vibrato, a good general rule is less or slower vibrato on low notes and a more singing, faster vibrato on high notes. For example, you wouldn't want to start the etude with super fast vibrato. You also probably don't want to have really slow vibrato on the high points of this etude in the tenor register, like in measures 21 and 22. One of the best things about this etude is that you have lots of room for rubato, or expressive shaping of the phrasing and tempo. Some beats may move quicker, some may move slower. I encourage you to learn this etude first in time, and then employ playful experimentation with musical ideas. Just remember that the general sense of time should never go completely out the window, and try to keep your musical ideas within the character of the music. This is a super fun and bouncy etude in the key of E minor, which has the same key signature as G major. Practice your G major scale starting on E to get familiar with this key. There are two big things that make this etude challenging: clarity of notes and planning your breathing so that you don't end up with a bunch of built-up stale air. Let's talk through the clarity issue first. It is very important that you incorporate flicking into your practice and performance of this etude. If you're looking to practice your flicking, just do a quick Google search. Several bassoonists have resources out there to help you finesse your flicking. The other big factor for clarity throughout this etude is articulation with good support and fast air speed. Your air speed should be the main component of your articulation, with just enough tongue to add definition to the starts of your notes. I really want you to listen for clarity and consistency on every single note. To do that effectively, I would start learning this etude at quarter note equals 60, which is half tempo, so that you can really hear how every note sounds, like this. The second big challenge here is figuring out your breathing. You cannot breathe in every single rest. Please do not try. The rests here are part of the rhythm, part of the music, part of the groove. Treat them as important as the notes you are playing, which will help you also make musical lines across the rests. You may also need to exhale in some places to get rid of any stale air buildup. It can be helpful to have a plan for where you're going to inhale and exhale and to what degree. Let's take a look at some of the more difficult measures and talk about how to approach them. Measures 34 to 47 are hard, with all of those big leaps and jumping between tenor clef and bass clef. If you're having trouble learning the notes, or you're hesitating a lot, try saying the note names as a practice strategy, like this, starting in measure 34. D, C sharp, C, B, D, B, A, G sharp, E, D, G sharp, A, E, C, G, F sharp, D, C, A, G, etc. Chances are the places that you're hesitating, where you say the note names, are the same places that you're hesitating when you play it on the bassoon. Try to get the note names smooth, and then put the bassoon back and play it at the same speed that you were saying the note names, and think the note names really hard in your head. You're helping your brain to make the connection between what you see on the page and what you play on the bassoon. Be sure in this section that you don't rush through the slurred notes. Drawing a little tenuto line on the first note of the two-note slurs can be helpful to slow you down. You can also incorporate backwards practice, where you start at the end of a group or a measure and add preceding notes one at a time, like measure 39 to the downbeat of measure 41, like this. A few ideas as you increase the tempo of this etude. Try to keep your eyes moving ahead to the notes that come next, especially in the sections with big leaps. Knowing what comes next should help you stutter less. As you move to feeling this etude in 2 rather than in 4, find a groove. It should sound easy without accenting every beat. One good way to find a groove is to use drum loops. You can find those in apps or online. Or an easy way to practice feeling this in a relaxed groove is to play the entire thing on an offbeat, like this. Have fun with this etude. Keep it light and try not to rush no matter the tempo you take. Now that we've gone through all three of your etudes, I'd like to give you a few general practice and performance strategies. First, I encourage you to utilize your practice time in an intelligent way. My personal recommendation is that you spend at least 1/3 of your practice time on fundamentals. The remainder of your practice time should be strategic. If you only have 20 minutes to work on your etudes, don't just start at the beginning of etude number 1 and run through things. Pick the spots that need the most work. This will be a far more efficient use of your time, rather than running through things at high speeds, ignoring problems, and building bad habits. Also, you can never do too much slow practice. Second, reeds play a very significant role in our success as bassoonists. If possible, you should have a minimum of 3 working bassoon reeds that you rotate regularly. You never want to end up in a situation where you only have the one good reed. Adjusting your reeds is a learned skill, one that I would encourage you to look into with a Google or YouTube search. There are some great adjustments that you can make with minimal tools and a little bit of knowledge. And last, we all get nervous. Performing these etudes can seem like a really scary prospect. But how do we get better at anything? We practice. The more you can play for people, the more comfortable performing will become. I highly encourage you to set up mock auditions regularly before your first audition. My personal strategy when I get nervous is to focus on my breath, remember why I'm performing, have confidence in the knowledge that I've done everything I can do to be prepared, and find my joy and gratitude in the moment. We are all extremely privileged that we get to make music on a regular basis, and even more privileged because we play the bassoon. The bassoon gives us our musical voice, a way of communicating ideas and emotions that have personal meaning that we wish to share with others. I hope you are able to find your voice in the study and performance of these etudes, and I wish you all the best in the pursuit of your bassoon goals. Play beautifully.